Two brothers, one family, three NASCAR Cup Series championships, and careers that helped define a generation of NASCAR. Terry and Bobby Labonte didn't just make it to NASCAR, they became champions. But what's really fascinating about the Labonte brothers isn't simply that they both reached the top, it's how differently they got there. One was known as the Iceman, the other became one of the stars of the Gibbs racing dynasty. And for years, they weren't just brothers watching each other race, they were competitors. Sometimes they were fighting for the same checkered flags, and sometimes they were fighting for the same championship. This is the story of the Labonte brothers. Long before the championships, the Hall of Fame inductions, and the famous race cars, the Labonte story began in Corpus Christi, Texas. Terry was the older brother, and like so many NASCAR families, the road to the big leagues started with racing at the local level. Terry quickly showed that he had something special. In 1978, at just 21 years old, he made his first NASCAR Premier Series start at Darlington Raceway. And Darlington is not exactly the place you would expect a young rookie to make his debut. In one of the most difficult tracks in NASCAR. But Terry did it. He didn't just survive, he finished fourth. The performance helped announce that this young Texan belonged in NASCAR. And it wouldn't be long before he became one of the sport's biggest stars. Terry Labonte would earn the nickname Iceman because of his calm demeanor behind the wheel. He wasn't necessarily the loudest driver. He wasn't known for consistently trash-talking his competitors. Instead, Terry had a reputation for being incredibly consistent. He just went out there and did his job, and eventually, that consistency produced a championship. In 1984, driving for Billy Hagan, Terry Labonte won his first NASCAR Cup Series championship. He only won 2 races that season, but he was incredibly consistent, recording 24 top 10 finishes. That championship was the beginning of something that would become almost impossible to believe, because Terry wasn't finished, not even close. After winning his first championship, Terry continued to build an incredible career. But then something happened that makes his story very unusual. He went 12 years without winning another championship. 12 years! And during that time, NASCAR changed dramatically. New stars emerged, new teams became dominant, the sport became faster and even more competitive. But Terry kept going. And in 1996, driving for Rick Hendrick and Hendrick Motorsports, the Iceman did it again. Did something remarkable. He became a NASCAR Cup Series champion. Again. 12 years after his first championship. The 2 championship seasons were remarkably similar. In both 84 and 96, Terry won 2 races. In both seasons, he recorded 24 top 10 finishes. And in both championship seasons, he only had 3 DNFs. Terry Labonte had become the definition of consistency. And by this point, he wasn't just a successful NASCAR driver. He was a legend. But there was another Labonte waiting in the wings. His younger brother, Bobby. Bobby Labonte had spent years following his brother's career, but eventually, he created his own path. And by the early 1990s, Bobby was making his way through the NASCAR National Series. Then came 1995. Bobby was hired by Joe Gibbs Racing to drive the famous number 18 Interstate Battery Chevrolet. And suddenly, the younger Labonte wasn't just Terry's little brother anymore. He was a legitimate NASCAR Cup Series driver, and he was about to become a star. Bobby won his first Cup Series race in the Coke 600 at Charlotte Speedway in 1995. And incredibly, his first Cup victory came with his older brother right there on the track. Bobby won, Terry finished second. Think about that. 2 brothers, one of the biggest races in NASCAR, and they finished 1-2. For Bobby, it was his first Cup win of his career. For the Labonte family, it had to be an unbelievable moment, but it wouldn't be the last time these 2 brothers battled each other for the win. When most people think about brothers racing against each other, they imagine a little friendly competition. But NASCAR is different. Once the helmets go on, you're not racing your brother. You're racing the driver next to you. And Terry and Bobby eventually found themselves in that exact situation. In 1995 at Michigan, Bobby once again won while Terry finished second. Then in 97 at Talladega, the roles were reversed. This time, Terry won, and Bobby finished second. 3 times, the Labonte brothers finished first and second in a cup race. Bobby won 2 of those 3 battles. Terry won once. But perhaps the most interesting part of their relationship wasn't when one beat the other. It was watching both of their careers develop at the same time. Terry was already a champion. Bobby was becoming one of NASCAR's biggest young stars. And then came the year 2000. By the end of the 90s, Bobby Labonte had established himself as one of the best drivers in NASCAR. In 1999, he finished second in the championship standings. He was close, very close. But in 2000, everything came together. Bobby won 4 races. He consistently finished near the front. And when the season ended, Bobby Labonte was the NASCAR Cup Series champion. The younger brother had finally joined his older brother as a champion. Terry won his championship in '84 and '96. Bobby won his in 2000. Together, now the brothers had 3 Cup Series championships, and their careers had become one of the most remarkable family stories in NASCAR history. What's so interesting about the Labonte brothers is that their careers almost mirror each other. Terry was the veteran, the calm, methodical driver who seemed to be around forever. He competed in NASCAR's premier series from '78 all the way to 2014. He made 890 starts, he won 22 races, and he won a championship 12 years apart. Bobby was a bit different. He came into NASCAR in a different era. He became a star with Joe Gibbs Racing. He also won 21 Cup races, and his 2000 championship came during one of the most competitive eras in NASCAR. He was racing against names like Dale Earnhardt, Jeff Gordon, Dale Jarrett, Mark Martin, and Rusty Wallace. And somehow, the Labonte family had produced 2 champions capable of competing with all of them. And Terry Labonte had another accomplishment that made him very unique. He became known as the Iron Man. Terry started 655 consecutive Cup races. That streak began in '79 and lasted until 2000. For more than 2 decades, Terry simply kept showing up, race after race, season after season, and that longevity became one of the defining characteristics of his entire career. Even after winning his second championship in '96, Terry kept racing. He continued competing against a new generation of drivers, and incredibly, his final Cup victory came at Darlington Raceway in '03, the same track where he had made his Cup debut 25 years earlier. It was almost poetic. His first Cup win had come at Darlington, his final one came at Darlington. Eventually, both Labonte brothers stepped away from full-time NASCAR competition, but their legacies were already secured. Terry was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2016. 4 years later, Bobby would join him, and that put the Labonte brothers into an extremely rare company. They became only the second pair of brothers inducted to the Hall of Fame. The other pair, Richard and Maurice Petty. That's pretty incredible. 2 brothers from Texas, both NASCAR Cup champions, both NASCAR Hall of Famers, and both competing in an era filled with some of the greatest drivers the sport has ever produced. But maybe the most fascinating thing about the Labonte brothers isn't the championships. It's the fact that neither brother needed the other to become great. Terry built his own legacy. Bobby built his own legacy. But together, they created something that NASCAR rarely sees. A family where 2 brothers didn't simply reach the highest levels. They became champions at the highest level. They raced each other. They finished first and second. They competed against the same legends. And eventually, they both ended up in the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Terry finished his career with 22 Cup wins and 2 championships. Bobby with 21 wins and 1 championship. Combined, that's 43 Cup wins, 3 championships. But the numbers don't tell the entire story, because the Labonte brothers weren't just successful NASCAR drivers. They were representatives of 2 different generations of the sport. Terry represented the old school NASCAR driver who simply showed up every week and got the job done. Bobby represented the next generation of driver, a driver who became the centerpiece of one of NASCAR's most successful teams and eras, and somehow they were brothers. NASCAR has produced some incredible racing families. The Pettys, the Earnhardts, the Waltrips, the Allisons, and many others. But the story of Terry and Bobby Labonte deserves to be remembered, because it's not often that 2 brothers become NASCAR champions. It's even rarer for both of them to become Hall of Famers. And it's almost impossible to imagine a better example of two brothers turning a family's passion into a piece of NASCAR history. Terry Labonte, the Iceman, the Iron Man, two-time Cup champion. Bobby Labonte, the Interstate Battery star, NASCAR Cup champion. Two brothers, 3 championships, 43 Cup Series victories, and one incredible NASCAR legacy. The Labonte brothers didn't just race in NASCAR. They became part of it, part of its history. But that's going to do it for this video. If you enjoy NASCAR history or current NASCAR conversation, make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.